What you're seeing on this page here is our SPA's listing page. You can kind of think about this as the main landing page. I would assume you spend probably most of your time here because we want to house all of your agreements, even the ones that are in the past, maybe that are expired, or the ones for the future that are still in draft mode, right? This is, again, that centralized warehouse for all of your special pricing agreements in one place. Traditionally, what we hear a lot from our customers is that maybe they're leveraging legacy tools or Excel spreadsheets with many different tabs, sometimes up to the hundreds. It's a little bit more decentralized and harder to have this consolidated view. So with our SPA's listing page, everything is here, right? You can go ahead and search for something very quickly. You can filter by a particular distributor. So you can take a look at, okay, what are some of the existing SPA contracts that we have with BNMF Electrical? You can also do the same thing with end customers. Which SPAs do we have today that involves a certain end customer? Or a lot more different types of attributes that you can filter with. For example, if we want to take a look at all of the expiring contracts or any of the contracts that are in draft mode, maybe requires our attention to push them forward, right? So just being able to be flexible with the filtering and finding what you need very quickly in this consolidated view. What I wanted to show next is go through what actually goes into an enable SPA contract, right? What are the deal configuration details? But before getting there, just wanted to also quickly call out, recently we launched the capability to be able to bulk edit your SPA contracts as well as bulk renewals, right? So thinking about the situations where maybe you might be launching a new product line, rather than adding those products into a SPA one by one and then having to renew them for the new period one by one, what we can do is use a bulk edit tool and just apply those changes to all the SPAs that you want to apply those changes to. Potentially what we think is that can potentially save hundreds of hours on your end rather than having to do that one by one, right? So going into an example here. So of course you can create SPAs ad hoc at the bottom, but what I'm going to do instead is jump into an existing contract that I had previously built out. I think that will better illustrate what we're talking about here. So this is the SPA creation page, or the deal configuration page, as you may call it. At the top, this is a visual illustration on what we were just talking about, right? You as the manufacturer today, let's pretend we're all SC Electrical. You may be selling your goods through Builder Depot, and they're selling it to the end customer, Axiom Wire Contractors, often at a special price. And what's happening here in terms of the math is dependent on what Builder Depot sells in terms of the volume, in terms of the price, they might be claiming support from you, and that's sort of the SPA three-party relationship, right? So the same goes for the configuration sections. The first step is to, of course, identify the parties. We have SC Electrical as the manufacturer. The distributor then becomes selectable for you. So earlier, Razib talked about data ingestion. When we're thinking about your ERP data, all of the distributor information, end customer information, those mapping files, price lists, product information, all of that will be flowing into Enable and then constantly being up to date. So here we have the full list of your distributors that are selectable, including those maybe you do not currently offer any SPAs, but might have to in the future. We want to make that available in this platform as well. We do the same thing with end customers. So today we have Axiom Wire Contractors selected. If we wanted to include multiple end customers, that's definitely an option as well. Or we have heard in the industry where sometimes the manufacturer, you might not care about who the actual end customer is. Maybe you just want to take a look at the sales data from the distributor. So we do have the ability to select the option for creating a SPA for any end customer. So really the flexibility is there. After identifying the parties, just moving on to details, this is just thinking about the basic information, right? The external reference for your distributor, the internal agreement name to make it a little bit easier to understand, and then the delivery types, currency, start and end date, right? So as we move along this deal configuration page, there's going to be some areas where we start to think about what qualifies as an eligible transaction. So start and end date, of course, is one. Selecting the distributor and customer is one, right? So with start and end date, we can be really flexible. We know that with SPAs, these are typically pretty dynamic, sometimes a little bit more short term, right? You might be running it only for 3 months or maybe a month or even a couple of weeks. You want to keep that dynamic nature so you can be very flexible with the start and end dates. And then we move down to the distributor terms. This is now thinking about the how. So how is the calculation going to be made when your distributor is submitting their claims, right? If you're familiar with our trading programs mechanisms, this is something very similar. Razib earlier talked about those different calculation methods. This is where we make it happen, right? Today, you might be doing something as simple as a fixed amount per unit on your SPA. So what this means is whenever Builder Depot sells a particular unit to Axiom Wire Contractor, this is the value that they're going to claim back from you. Of course, we can have a value for distributed delivery and direct delivery. And if those rates are different, this is where you could specify those values. Other configuration options and flexibility, we've heard a lot of times in the industry, you might want to include quantity limits, right? For example, they can only sell 100 units per SKU, let's say. This is where you can enforce that. And so anything that they sell above that unit, above that limit, will not be accounted for. So there's a lot of checks that we can do that's happening behind the scenes when we're setting up this agreement. A few other mechanisms that I wanted to go over. Of course, you might be doing something like a percent of price list, right? So anytime price list is mentioned in this platform or throughout this webinar, we essentially have the ability to ingest your prices because we know that your prices are changing throughout the year. You also might be offering different prices for different distributors, different end customers. So we have the ability to allow for you to select those different versions of prices and different prices altogether, right? What I mean by that is, let's say today we're taking a look at 2022 SC lighting prices, and you might want to offer a 5% claim support for your distributor, for the distributed delivery, 4% for direct. What we can take a look at then is the different versions, right? Let's say the 2022 SC lighting prices is changing throughout the year. We can take a look at, is it going to be the version that's at the point of sale, or is it the version at approval, or is it at claim, right? So this is how we can ingest and make sure those information are up to date to make the calculations correct. Under config, we do have sort of the pricing module here. It just allows you to keep track of all of those different prices that we're ingesting from your system. This information might live in your ERP today, right? If I go into here, we can see that there are different versions, and this just allows us to take a look at very accurately from the timestamp, which prices are we going to be looking at for each of the SKUs that you're selling or selling through the distributor. Another mechanism I wanted to go over is the price difference, right? This is also a really common mechanism that we hear, or calculation method that we hear in the industry. So we might be looking at your into stock price and then the end customer supported price. We essentially just take the delta between that. That's what you're going to be offering as support for your distributor, right? Now, let's say today you are adapting, if your organization is adapting the FIFO or LIFO model, we do also have the ability to support that. Very recently, we launched the ability to ingest your essentially sales order data or your distributor's PO data, right? So with our quantity and price ledger, we're essentially ingesting those data and taking a look at your distributor's into stock price at the point of purchase from your distributor, right? So every single line that you see here are PO receipts. We know who the distributor is, the invoice date, the branch, the product SKU, the into stock cost, as well as how many units did they purchase, right? So this allows us to essentially track the inventory that they have on the particular widget, as well as what was the cost that they purchased at. So how does this tie to LIFO or FIFO, right? Let's say today we're looking at a first in, first out example. Then whenever your distributor submits their claim data for support, we would essentially take a look at the oldest PO receipt that lives inside the platform that we have here and calculate from those units. Now, let's say if we're looking at this example and they claimed 50 units, then those 4 additional units, we would then be looking at the second oldest PO receipt. So that's how we can now start to look at the methodologies that you're applying for your distributors. Now, I know LIFO and FIFO was something that's particularly interesting for a lot of our customers. A lot of them were asking for it. So if you have any additional questions when it comes to LIFO or FIFO, how does that apply to your existing processes? We're definitely happy to sort of double click into that in a separate conversation. So going back to this view, so of course, one thing I wanted to stress is with our platform, it's all about flexibility, right? Earlier, Razib talked about the ability to build out custom mechanisms. So any of these mechanisms that are, maybe these 6 mechanisms that you see here do not apply to the calculations that you're doing today. Maybe your distributor is requesting something that's a little bit more nuanced, right? We have the ability to write custom mechanisms. And in this page, you'll see that we have sort of a formula right here represented by these different variables, right? You can essentially do the same thing and just write your own expression to make the calculation that you need for your distributors. So again, this is just adding another layer of flexibility dependent on your use case. Once we have the distributor term, so this is the how is the calculation going to be made? The rest of the portion is figuring out the what. So if you care about the end customer price, we have heard in some situations where you might not necessarily need to verify the end customer pricing, but if you do, this is where we can specify that information. We can take a look at a list price of a percentage discount or a fixed contract price. Again, the flexibility is there. And once we move down to branches and products, this is looking at eligibility. You might be offering certain branch level SPAs. Rather than creating those one by one, we can ingest all the spots that are, all the branches that are eligible for this particular distributor. Same thing goes for products, right? Tying back to the data ingestion piece, when we're thinking about products, your entire product hierarchy becomes selectable inside Enable. If I give you an example, just changing this to the fixed amount per unit, I think this is a better way to illustrate this. Once we go down here, click on edit, your entire product hierarchy now becomes selectable. We can break it down by product categories, product groups, but let's say we select these 3 categories and click on OK. This is where you can specify product category specific rates based on the mechanism that we just looked at. Right? For example, for indoor lighting fixtures and plugs and connectors are all going to get that $5 and $4 dependent on the delivery type. But maybe we want to override for LED. We're actually going to give them $10 and $8 instead. So this is where you can apply product category specific rates based on the mechanism that we were just looking at. So you can get very, very granular with the SPAs, all housed inside the same contract. Once we have the category selected, of course, all the individual SKUs within applies as well. So you can give it, you could all the way down to the SKU level, you can give it its own rate as well. So what we saw at the top are just the default rates that get applied across the board. But if you wanted to, we give you the flexibility to apply product level specific rates as well. So again, the key here really is just flexibility, right? One thing I wanted to call out is today you might have a lot of these SPA contract details living in one place already, maybe in Excel or in a different system. You might be wondering, like, when we move with Enable, do we have to create these one by one? The option is there for us to do a bulk upload, right? So rather than filling out the details one by one, we do have a contract import capability. We basically map out all of your details to make it Enable ready. So once we ingest all of that data, they're going to be represented all inside the SPA listing page with all the details, and the calculations are all correct happening behind the scenes. So that's essentially the Enable SPA contract 101. This is the setup process. Now again, like, what's happening behind the scenes is the automatic calculation. What happens after this step, of course, with Enable, we can also help with the contract management process, right? So what we can do actually is, based on the details that you see here, we do have the ability to automatically generate a PDF based on the terms and conditions, the details of that particular SPA we were just looking at, all transposed onto this document. So that three-party relationship, things like the details, the distributor terms, the mechanism, end customer pricing, as well as product and branches eligibility is all specified here. At this point, you can send this to someone internal for review, or send this over to your distributor trading partner for them to review and make sure that everyone's on the same page. These are how the calculations are going to be made for that claim back support. All right, so after this step, of course, now let's assume this is a live active contract and your distributors, of course, would want to submit their claims, right? So sort of the next step of that process is thinking about how can we process those distributor sales data. So today with your distributors, you might be receiving their transactions, their sales out data to the end customer, maybe through an email, or maybe they're just sending you a file directly. Maybe they're dropping it to an SFTP. You need to go pull that. With Enable, all those options are available for you as well. So what we can do is take whatever your distributors are sending to you. We could apply data transformation services to, again, make it Enable ready. So once all that transactions data flows into Enable, we're just going to run the calculations. Now, if you want a more streamlined approach with Enable, we do have what we call the collaborator portal. So this is a completely free version of Enable that you can invite your distributors to. And there's a couple things that they could do here, right? They can review the SPAs that they were invited to, but they can actually submit their transactions directly from here. And there's a couple benefits with doing it through this platform. So let's go ahead and take you through that process. So with our import wizard, it essentially provides a template for your distributors to download. And so if they follow that template, we're going to make sure that the data that they submit is going to follow that structure, right? So today they might be just sending you a bunch of data unfiltered, and you kind of have to sift through that yourself. With this upload tool, they can essentially drop their claims file with the right format. We're going to actually provide validation and show them, like, this is the dollar value, the number of transactions. If there were any unrecognized references for this particular SPA, it gives them a warning, right? So it sort of gives them a heads up, like, hey, you're submitting a lot of transactions that you might not receive support on. You might want to go back and check to make sure those are rectified, right? And once they go through this process, they can just go ahead and click on submit. What happens on your view or your side of things is they have the ability, or you have the ability, to review all those transactions that were submitted, right? As well as those unrecognized references, just in case maybe they did something incorrectly. It's a slight error, but those transactions are still eligible. You have the ability to approve that and make them still flow through, right? So that's wrapping up the overall claims process. So the next step of this whole thing is now we have the distributors constantly submitting their transactions data. Of course, is going to be the next thing is going to be the output. So with our SPA support report, we want to make sure that we're providing you the data on how much you should be paying your distributors, right? So with the SPA support report, we can show you line by line, day by day, which SPA does it match up to for which customer. We can take a look at the branch information, delivery type, as well as the specific SKU and how many units were transacted, right? The actual support column shows you how much you should be providing as support for your distributor, whereas the distributor estimate column is what the distributor thinks that they should be claiming. So earlier when I walked you through the import transactions flow, they do have the ability to provide what they think they should be collecting from you, and we'll show you the difference, as well as any unsupported reasons, right? So any of those unrecognized references, maybe they are including transactions for a particular product that's not eligible for a SKU, or maybe the date ranges were wrong. They're providing something that's out of range, right? So all that information is available to you in this SPA support report with great detail. Of course, there's different criteria and filters that you can play around with if you wanted to. you can download that report as a CSV, extract that back out into your systems to do further data analysis. Or if you want to extract that into your business intelligence tools, those are all options that we could support. With our advanced reporting capabilities, we essentially allow you to build custom reports based on your mechanisms. And we are essentially just writing SQL scripts from grabbing information from our database. So the flexibility is there. You can kind of work with our team to see what your requirements are and what that report should look like. Now, of course, beyond that, with Enable, we always want to provide actionable insights for you as well. So similar to our training programs, we do have our executive dashboard for SPAs as well. So this is just a top level view into your SPA programs. Metrics such as renewal statuses, right? Across all of your existing SPAs that you have for your distributors, how many of those are inactive? How many of those are due for renewal? Maybe you want to take action and make sure they're not left in limbo when the new term comes. We also give you insight on things like top products by claim value or top end customers by claim value. So you can do some assessment and see which are the products that we're providing the most support on. Maybe we want to do some adjustments to our pricing overall in the industry to make sure that it does make sense for your organization, right? So with our executive dashboard, it's really just a quick stop to have a look at what are some of the things that you can potentially do differently. And we're also always trying to include more and more key metrics in this platform. So if you have any suggestions on what kind of insights you would like to see, our product team is definitely always happy to take those into consideration. And so that's what we wanted to show in the special pricing agreement platform today. I hope the simplicity shows that we can provide a lot of efficiency into your SPA process. Just managing SPAs, like Razib mentioned, a lot of complexity goes into it, but hopefully you see the value with our platform, with mechanisms, the eligibility, with qualifying transactions. We're going to do all of that we're going to do all of that automatically as opposed to manually, right? Calculating the SPA support, processing your distributor claims. All the data is flowing in naturally and automatically, so you have the output that you